Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 77, The Cradle Robbers. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. 17-year-old Maggie has found a new beau, the 25-year-old John, who she met at a bookstore. Despite her protestation that it's the best relationship she's ever had, Maxwell is dead set against it because he remembers being a 25-year-old man who could only think about sex, women, and how to combine the two. Even so, Maggie's new boyfriend introduces Fran to his 25-year-old friend Mike, and those two hit it off. Fran takes advantage of Maxwell's as of yet undiagnosed short-term hearing loss to allow Maggie to continue seeing John long enough to realize that she has nothing in common with him. Upon seeing Maggie and Fran fraternizing with John and Mike, Maxwell gets angry, and Fran reminds him that this situation is entirely his fault. Not only was he too vain to see the doctor when he couldn't hear, but also he told Fran he loved her, and then he took it back. Unsurprisingly, Fran's plan works. During their double date, Maggie decides that she wants to break up with John and apologizes for previously telling Fran that she wasn't her daughter, because Fran has actually been like a mother to her. Maxwell finally goes to the doctor and learns that his hearing loss is only temporary and likely caused by either a virus or prolonged exposure to an unusual frequency or pitch. Fran concludes it must be a virus and then promptly yells in his ear.
Yes.
Maxwell goes into his office and finds Cece waiting for him on the porch outside and apologizes for keeping her waiting, telling her how lovely she looks, only to discover that she finally fell asleep after being unable to sleep for days in a row despite the decaf soda, tea, and coffee Niles had been giving her. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
No, you've got it.
Thank you. Thank you. I try. Would you like to take us to scene one in the park?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm assuming Central Park.
That's what it looked like to me.
Yes. So actually, Fran and Maxwell we see are having a picnic. Um, Maxwell's even kind of laying down on the blanket with his elbow propping him up. And Fran's, exclaiming how glad she is to be back in nature, out of the dining room. And of course, at that point, the camera kind of pans to a wider view and we see Niles there still with like his service
His uniform. He's in a suit and tie.
yeah, but like also has like the tray and stuff you would have at home in the dining room.
True.
And of course, Niles, asks peppermint or Darjeeling. Not sure if I got that pronunciation. To which Fran responds mint.
Mm-hmm.
Maxwell, meanwhile, is telling, Fran, yeah, it was such a wonderful idea to come out on a picnic. But, I believe it's Maxwell who says, but he had never taken her to be like a natural outdoor type.
Yep.
He's like, oh, please. That's why I don't wear any makeup. And of course, there's a look. And then she actually starts reminiscing about how back when she went to Camp Kindervelt, which we talked about, which season was that? 2?
Oh, in the episode Kindervelt Days, I think it was season 2.
Yeah. And she's talking about like back then she and Val would toast marshmallows on her curling iron. And, you could steam a Frankfurter on the hot curlers. And, it's so good you feel like you're at Nathan's.
Right. Totally
But
believable.
but then this is as she's, talking about this, we start to get a little hint that not all great with Maxwell's hearing. What are you saying? What are you saying? Like
Right.
that's the third time, um and Fran is like, that's the third time that you've said, what are you saying? Like something is wrong with your hearing. And Maxwell's like, what? Oh, no, the hearing's fine. Excel's a little suspicious.
Right.
And then, Fran reminisces about a relative
Her dad, yeah.
who had so much wax in his ear that Madame Tussaud could make a Linda Hunt
Mm-hmm.
mannequin, or not mannequin, but yeah.
wax figurine.
Wax figurine. Yes, exactly. Um, and Niles, in the meantime, is telling Fran, oh, he'll never go to the doctor. He's far too vain to admit his hearing is going. And as he's saying this, Niles is putting on some sunglasses and he also puts a ball cap on backwards and he continues, it's so sad when a man can't age gracefully. And of course, to us, he looks like he's trying to be.
Correct. Correct.
Um, Now, this is the point in which they observe a spectacle. Look at that 30-year-old man kissing that young girl. Where are her parents? This is Maxwell speaking. And of course, Fran enthusiastically is like, hi, Maggie, which, uh, you know, Maxwell's none too pleased. He's rearing to go, and Fran immediately is like, calm down, calm down. It's just a phase. I once dated an older guy in high school. Nothing led to nothing but heartbreak, especially when he failed me in math.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this opening scene really sets up the two main plot lines of this episode. One, Maggie
Correct.
with this older man, and two, Maxwell's hearing issues.
Correct.
Anything to add to this opening scene?
I do not.
Okay.
So we go back to the house, and Maxwell is like basically dragging Maggie, not physically, but bringing her back into the house. All right, young lady, you've got some explaining to do. Start talking. And so Maggie starts saying, Daddy, I was just, and he cuts her off. I don't want to hear it. Now go upstairs to your room. And Fran, of course, has followed them in and says, oh, come on. Like she couldn't climb out the window, shimmy down the trellis, and pay Niles extra so that she could. Oh, but you know what? This is between you and your daughter. And so
Mm-hmm.
we go back to the main conversation between Maxwell and Maggie, and he's telling her that that boy is much too old for you. And Maggie's like, Dad, he's only 25. It's the best relationship I've ever had. And Maxwell's incredulous. When did the two of you meet? This morning at a bookstore. And Fran is off in the corner and she's like, wow, a bookstore. Gee, that's a great place to meet intelligent guys. Oh, whoopsie. They'd have to light it bright enough so you could actually read. Nah, no good. And so we go back to the conversation between Maggie and Maxwell. Come on, Dad, you don't know him. He's self-reliant. He's ambitious. Plus, he's already a vice president. Where? His father's firm. Oh, perfect. Some spoiled little rich brat living off his father. Meanwhile, poor Brighton walked in just to hear that. And he's like, wait, what'd I do? And he walks out exasperated. Which I think is like one of the only times we see him. I think we see him once more in the entire episode. Um, anyway, so Maggie says to her dad that I'm not a little girl anymore. I'm not a kid. Why don't you trust me? And Maxwell's like, because I was a 25-year-old boy once and I had nothing on my mind but sex, women, and how to combine them. And Fran, of course, adds in her commentary again, my luck. I don't get to meet him until he's going deaf and he can't digest corn. Um, and Maxwell tells Maggie that she's never going to see this guy again because he's going to, you know, anyway, he says to her, you're never going to see him again. And Maggie stomps off, you're so unfair. And Maxwell says to Fran, all right, that's it. I'm locking her in her room until she's your age. And Fran's like, we can't lock her away for 5 years. Come on. Why don't we at least meet him? And then Maggie won't hate us. And Maxwell at first tries to keep an open mind. Then he starts saying, I don't suppose there could be any harm in meeting the twisted little cradle robbing sex maniac. Needless to say, his mind is not actually open.
Mm-hmm.
And Fran again comments, sex maniac. Maybe I should meet this guy by myself. Well, Maxwell puts his foot down. I forbid Margaret to go to see him. I forbid her to go out with some 25-year-old. And Fran's like, well, fine. If you forbid her to see him, she's just going to sneak out anyway. I was 17 once too. I snuck out all the time. Of course, I didn't have a boyfriend. I just wanted to eat bacon, which everyone who's listened to any of our podcasts knows my thought on that comment.
Yep.
Do you have anything you want to add?
No.
All right. Would you like to take us the bookstore?
Yes. So we are at the bookstore. Fran and Maggie are there. And again, Maggie's kind of like asking, why is, Maxwell so mad? What's the big deal? And Fran starts talking about like, oh, just look at Anna Nicole Smith. She married someone 60 years older and then he died. And what does she have now? His fortune. And Maggie's like, So, and Fran says, sometimes they live.
Correct.
At that moment, John and his friend, who we learn is Mike, come in. John says, "Hi, Maggie." And immediately Maggie's like gushing about him to Fran. Isn't he smart?
Yes.
And then John turns to Fran, who is your beautiful friend. He is smart. And then John introduces his friend Mike. And Mike, says that he had come, for a cappuccino and a hot new Grisham. To which Fran, who is currently eating like the almond horn, says, "I don't know about Grisham, but the almond horn is delicious."
Correct.
Yeah. And again, at this point, I believe the Mike and John go to kind of order their own stuff, and Maggie's, asking Fran, what do you think? And Fran still points out there's too big of an age difference.
Right.
Now, there's kind of like a time jump.
Yeah, we can count this as one or two scenes, your choice.
I counted it as a different scene, but
Okay, that's
either
fine.
way. Okay.
So now we're still at the bookstore, but now the four of them are at the table: Maggie, John, Fran, and Mike. And Mike is saying to Fran that I can't believe how much we have in common. And she's like, I know, we're both Libras. We both love jazz, and we both think that on the Mary Tyler Moore show, Phyllis's off-screen husband Lars might have been gay, and which to me is just such a specific thing to have come up in what appears to be a short time.
Yes.
And so Mike comments about how he loves these shows and he grew up on them. And Fran's like, yeah, me too. And he's like, wow, thank God for Nick at Night, huh? And she's like, yeah. And thankfully, sort of, John asks Fran where she went to school, and she tells him Hillcrest High, and he's like, oh, really? When did you graduate? And she gives one of those answers, my senior year. And so she then pivots. So, Mike McMullen, what are the chances of you being Jewish? And he's like, actually, my mother's Jewish, Fran, so technically that makes me. She's like, oh, say no more. Now, to satisfy my mother's second question, what does your father do? And this is where Fran discovers she really hit gold. Mike's father is a buyer for Lohmann's.
Yep.
Which, amazing.
Her face.
She it's almost reminiscent of when she found out she was going to the Barbra Streisand concert, except this time she didn't fully faint.
Yes. Yes.
Do you have anything you want to add?
No, I do not.
Would you like to take us to the kitchen then?
Yes. So we are in the kitchen. Niles is there. Cece walks in. Oh, I just could not get out of bed this morning. Niles is like, oh, someone leave a big rock on your coffin again? Very funny. Janitor shaped like a drum. So at this point, Cece does inquire, like, this coffee, it's decaf, right? And Niles is like, of course.
Yeah.
And we as the audience clearly can tell, no, it is not decaf. Yet Cece still, goes about, and she mentions, she would like, or does Niles offer, or does she ask for the
He
cold soda?
offers.
Okay, he offers a cold soda, and Cece, is making her way to the office and says, just make sure it's caffeine free. To which Niles again says, of course, which of course not.
Correct.
He, in fact, as soon as Cece is out of the kitchen, immediately goes to the refrigerator and pulls out regular Coca-Cola.
Correct.
At this time, Maxwell walks in, and Niles is going about his business, and he asks Maxwell, have you made an appointment with the doctor for a hearing test? What? Have you made an appointment with the doctor for a hearing test?
Actually, no. Niles says, I made you an appointment.
Oh, sorry. I made you. And he says that, and then Maxwell says, what? And so Niles repeats it. I made an appointment with the doctor for a hearing test. And Max was like, I heard what you bloody said. Like, who told you to set up an appointment? Miss Fine. Since when did she become the master of the house? 3 years ago, September.
Exactly.
Um, and then what we discover here is that um, it's Maxwell's left side where he obviously has a problem
Hmm.
because Niles goes to his left side and says, "Oh, what did you say? Did that I should kick back and take the rest of the day off?" And Maxwell, again, like trying to cover up whatever, says, "I said yes." All right. He puts the tray down, walks out. um, and at this time, Fran and Maggie are coming in from the side door, and
Hmm.
they're gushing about the boys, and Fran's saying how refreshing it is to have someone think that Pulp Fiction was John Travolta's first movie.
Right.
And Maggie, meanwhile, is like, "Oh, isn't this great? I'm dating John, you're dating Mike." And Fran's like, "Well, you're half right.
Hmm.
He is way too old for you. You're 17, he's 25." And she's like, "But, but, Mike's 25 and you're 33. I am not. We
Hmm.
celebrated your 30th birthday 3 years ago." I lied about my age. I said I was older to get the job. What about your parents? You said your father's 10 years older than your mother. No, no. I said he took 10 years of, uh, uh, she took 10 years off of his life.
Yes, she took 10 years off his life, which is very
So,
different.
yes. So at this point, Maggie's upset. You're such a hypocrite. And, like, why can you date well, he's not my daughter. Well, neither am I. And she storms out of the kitchen, and Fran follows and slips into kind of like the stereotype. Well, now, like, you can call, I don't know, because
She
she ends
says,
it with, "Because now I'm dead."
yeah, she says, well, go ahead and cancel the date with Mike because now I'm dead.
Yes.
Her
Very,
delivery is great.
yes, yes. Um, so yeah, do you have anything to add to that scene?
I do not.
Okay, well, you take us still in the kitchen, but at a later date.
Yes. So Fran is in the kitchen and she's on the phone with her mother and she's explaining that it's been 2 whole days and Maggie's still not talking to her. And she says, no, I didn't try to bribe her with a salty pretzel and an egg cream. And thank you very much. You know how many years it took me to stop solving my problems with food? She says that as she's taking a cookie and eating it, clearly trying to solve her problem with food. And then she adds, don't yell at me with your mouth full, which is exactly what she's doing, yelling with her mouth full. Goodbye, goodbye. And then she hangs up. Um, and so Brighton comes over to her and says, forget about Maggie. I'm here and I think you're great. In fact, I think you're the best. And Fran cuts her off. Brighton, you're not going to that makeout party. And he's like, yeah, well, you know what? You're on your own. And he walks away. And so
Mm-hmm.
then Gracie, gets Fran's attention and says, maybe I can give you some advice. Remember, I had a crush on an older man once? He used to bring me all those gifts. And Fran's like, sweetie, that was Santa. And so Gracie also, I think, leaves. And so it's now Fran and Niles in the kitchen. And Fran Fran says to him, like, how am I ever going to convince Maggie that she has nothing in common with a 25-year-old? And Niles looks at her and he's like, and you do? And she's like, well, absolutely. I was 25 and for several years.
Mm-hmm.
I believe this is the point that Cece comes in and she's clearly jittery. And she
Yes.
explains, I haven't slept for 3 days. Niles, are you sure this is herbal tea? To which he gives her yet another, of course. And so
Mm-hmm.
Cece again takes him at his word for some unknown reason.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, no sleep. And yet I feel oddly calm and relaxed. And Fran approaches her with Miss Babcock. And she almost jumps out of her skin. What?
Yeah.
And
It's a big startle. Like,
yeah, even if she thought she was calm and relaxed, she was not. And
mm-hmm.
so Fran says, I'm glad. I was just gonna say I'm really glad you're here because I need a woman to talk to. There's a beat, and then Cece looks at Niles. Aren't you going to say anything? And he's like, why? You mean because she said that just because you said she said that you thought I was going to say something about you not being a woman? That is beneath me, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Cece sits down and asks Fran, what's on your mind? What's on your mind, Nanny Fine? And she's like, well, Maggie thinks I'm being a hypocrite because I'm dating a 25-year-old and she's not allowed to. And Cece's like, wait a minute, who's Maggie? Oh, right, the big one. And Fran's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah. And Cece's like, oh, forget her. So you're dating a younger guy. Delicious. You know, I think it's far more natural. Women don't even reach their sexual peaks until their 30s. And Fran's like, yeah, well, for me, it's happening much earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And Cece, I'm not sure I can do this line justice, but I'm going to try. Oh, girlfriend, you've got it going on. And
Mm-hmm.
everyone looks at Cece and she's like, I'm sorry. I was watching something on Fox before I came over.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so Fran continues with her problem. And so she asks Cece, when you were Maggie's age, did you ever date an older guy? And Cece's like, of course I did. Sure. My father didn't care, but the world was a different place then when I was a girl. And Niles chimes in, yeah, they thought it was flat. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and Fran's like, you know what? If I was smart, I would just let her go out with this guy. And Cece's like, Nanny, fine. Maxwell will kill you. Ooh, good idea. Very unconventional. I like it. Clearly, her thinking went from that's a terrible idea to ooh, this will get rid of Fran. Excellent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, and Fran's like, don't you see? They will have nothing to talk about with each other. She'll get bored and break up with him on her own. Of course, I will have to chaperone with the young and eager to learn Mike. But it's not as if we don't have a lot of stuff in common. We both dig Tootie and the Blowfish. And then
Mm-hmm.
Fran walks out of the room not knowing that she got the band's name wrong.
Yep.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Nope.
Would you like to then go into the office?
Yes. So we are in the office, and Niles is bringing in a tray, and he offers to Maxwell, tea, sir? No response. Tea, sir? At this point, Niles starts moving to the other side to put down the tray, and he goes, how's the hearing, you lucky little brat born to money? And of
Mm-hmm.
course, Maxwell kind of perks up and says, on my right side, I hear fine.
Yep.
Just funning you, sir. Niles tries to cover up and he walks out of the room. Fran comes in and she's saying she has the perfect solution. And basically, Maxwell, who is still, he's sitting at his desk now, is like, well, the only thing I want to hear is that Margaret's never going to see that boy again.
Correct.
And she's like, and Fran's like, and that's exactly what you'll hear. And she, of course, being Fran, walks to the left side of
Mm-hmm.
Maxwell, and she starts saying, "They call him Flipper Flipper, faster than lightning. No one at sea is smarter than he." She pauses, trying to see if Maxwell's going to say anything about this.
Right.
He's kind of like obviously straining, but he just when he sees her looking at him, he's just like, "Well, go on."
Mm-hmm.
So Fran continues. And Flipper lives in a world full of wonder, lying there under the sea. And then at this point, Fran walks back to Maxwell's right side and says, and then she'll dump him. What do you think? And again, this entire time, Maxwell's obviously been having difficulty hearing, but he doesn't want to admit to it. So
Mm-hmm.
he just responds, oh, fabulous. Keep up your good work. And so triumphantly, Fran leaves. Niles then is at the doorway and he tells Maxwell on line one is Christopher Plummer. And
Correct.
then Niles goes away. And so Maxwell immediately, oh, good, he picks up the phone and he says without any preamble, now get around here and fix my blasted toilets, and then hangs up.
Correct.
Obviously, still having difficulty hearing. Is there anything
Correct.
to add to that scene?
Nothing.
Would you like to take us to the foyer?
Sure. So the doorbell rings and the boys are here and Gracie opens the door and one of them says to her, "Aren't you cute?" It's John who says that, and Fran's like, "All right, back off. Isn't it enough I'm letting you date her?" Gesturing to Maggie. And so the women greet their guys, and Maggie kisses John, and Mike kisses Fran, and Maxwell walks in at the worst time, shall we say, and shouts, "Young lady!" And both Fran and Maggie turn, "What?" And I think it's John says hello to him and congratulations. I hear that you're doing a new show. Why did Christopher Plummer drop out?
Mm-hmm.
Maxwell totally ignores him, grabs Fran by the wrist and says, "Miss Fine, you me alone right now." And Fran's like, "Oh, typical male, doesn't know what he's got till it's gone." And he pulls her into the hallway between the living room and his office in the
Kind of like
constantly.
throwing her into the hallway, like
It's like he,
force.
yeah, it's definitely forced. Like you see, like as he's pulling her, like it's like her leg lifts up as if she's been pulled. Like I'm clearly not describing this very well.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it's like obvious, like they're yeah,
like
she's
he
being
forced her.
propelled, yeah, forward. Yeah.
Yeah. So Maxwell wants to know, what is that guy still doing with Margaret? And why were you kissing his friend? And Fran's like, "Well, look at him," and waves, and he waves back. And she's like, "You didn't hear a word I said to you yesterday, did you?" Well, that's the problem with our whole relationship. That and the fact that you said that you loved me in Paris and then you took it back. You just took it back. And he's like, "I thought we agreed to put all that behind us." And she's like, "Well, I thought we'd be picking out China patterns. You know,
Mm.
if only you had," and then she's like, "Oh, you can't hear on this side." So she like moves him to the other side. "Oh, come here. If you'd only gotten your hearing
This
checked."
time they're in the office at this
Y-
point.
yes. Yes. They've like gone into the office so that the others can't hear what they're saying. And she's like, "If only you'd gotten your hearing checked, none of this would have happened. Why are you so vain about getting older?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm vain." And she's like, "Yes." And he's like, "I'm not the one trying to recapture my youth, Mrs. Robinson." And she's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa. Now, would you please relax? Maggie is a very smart girl. I guarantee you, one more date and she'll realize that she has nothing in common with him." And Maxwell begrudgingly accepts this and says, "Well, what about you and your young friend?" And she's like, "I'm a slow learner."
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Do you want to add anything?
Nope.
Would you like to take us to the, I guess, pool hall?
Yes. So we're at the pool hall. They're at a pool table, getting ready to play, the four of them. And they're talking, I think it's Mike. It's talking about how his accountant, they're talking about taxes, and Mike's saying how he only got like 200 in a refund. And Fran chimes in that she got 2,500 after
Mm-hmm.
she, claimed her dependents. And Mike's like, "Fran, like you're a young single lady. Like, how do you have dependents?" And she's like, "Oh, I take care, plenty of people. Donna, Karen, Ralph, Lauren, Liz, and Claiborne."
Yep.
And then Maggie kind of says, "I've never paid taxes before." And John's like, "How do you do that?" There's a beat. Oh, oh. Well, then a waitress comes over and asks everybody what their order is. And, John and Mike both order a vodka martini straight up. Fran thinks about it for a second and decides on margarita, no salt. And then
Mm-hmm.
Maggie kind of comes over to the waitress and she's like, "Oh, I'd like a Joan Collins." And
Yep.
Fran, "Honey, that's Tom Collins. And no, you could
Mm-hmm.
have, you'd have a better shot at getting Joan Collins." And then Maggie kind of walks away. And the waitress says, she's going to need some proof of their age. And she quickly says to Fran, "Ma'am, you're fine." And Fran pulls out some money, slips it to her. "Are you sure about that?" you know, and the waitress, winks, kind of knows where Fran's going with this. So she kind of makes a bigger show saying, "Excuse me, ma'am, please, I need to see your ID." And
Correct.
like taking out her wallet, getting her ID, and she says to the guys, "Oh, it's such a hassle."
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I believe it's Mike who says, "Oh, you know what? We should go down to the Blue Note and listen to some jazz." And Maggie's like, "Jazz? jazz? Or how do you like jazz? And John kind of chimes in, oh, yeah, we should do something like we all want to do. Like, what do you want to do? And Maggie's like, well, I could see Clueless again,
Mm-hmm.
which since then John immediately says, oh, how about eating? Like, eating's good. We can tell John's not too like keen on that idea. And so Maggie at this point kind of pulls Fran aside and you know, she wants to go and she says, I think I should be alone with John. And Fran's like, well, I want to be alone with Armand Sante, but that's not happening. And
Mm-hmm.
Maggie explains, no, I want to break up with him. We have nothing in common. He doesn't even know that the Saved by the Bell people went to college.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, so like she says it in such a way that it's just like,
She's
what?
disgusted.
Yes. And then Maggie makes a realization. You knew this would happen. And Fran's like, yeah, but it's perfectly normal. He's an adult, you're a teenager. And Maggie's like, but I have things in common with you. And Fran's like, well, that's because I'm stunted and have no life.
Yep.
And then Maggie said, apologizes for saying before that Fran wasn't her mother. You are like a real mother to me. And they hug. And then, Maggie inquires, if if Fran is tired of Mike. Fran looks over to where Mike is setting up a shot on the pool, and Mike's kind of giving her the eyes, and Fran goes, "So not."
Yeah.
And because basically Maggie's going to be leaving with John in the limo, and she'll just be with Mike. And
They'll cab it.
yep. Is there anything you'd like to add to that scene?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, can you take us to the kitchen?
Sure. So we sort of walk in the middle or towards the end of Fran serving as a beautician for Niles. And she's explaining to him, well, see, when your sideburns are longer, it makes your face look thinner. And she's like, plus, it wouldn't hurt to lay off the brie. And so Maxwell walks in, and Fran's like, oh, next customer. Niles gets up. Maxwell sits down. Fran covers him in a, what is it? I don't want to call it a bib, but basically what you
It's
get when you,
like, like what you use for haircuts.
exactly. I'm sure it has a real name. Um,
Probably.
and he's like, okay, well, I guess I could use a trim. Thank you. And he says that, I just caught Margaret making out with that boy from her class. And Fran's like, oh. And he's like, oh God, I'm so happy. I don't know what you did, but it certainly worked. And Fran's like, look, I was just like Maggie when I was 17, except I wasn't tall, rich, and thin. And I never put Miracle Whip on a bagel. And Maxwell, is in a mood where he's willing to admit that Fran was right, and he says that she was right about him as well, and that he was putting off having his hearing checked because he was afraid of getting older. And Fran says, "Oh well, I was dating Mike because he made me feel younger. You know what? I learned from that experience? It worked like a charm." And so she asks what the doctor said, and Maxwell explains, "Well, it seems I'm suffering from some short-term hearing loss. It could be a virus or prolonged exposure to unusual frequency or pitch." And Fran's like, "That's funny. I live here too, and I haven't had that problem." And then she's like trimming his hair and shouts in his ear, "Brighton!" And then she's like, "It must be a virus."
Mm-hmm. And
Obvious
she's shouting,
conclusion.
yeah, she's shouting in his left ear as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to take us through the office, back
Yes.
patio?
So we're Maxwell's entering the office. He looks out and he sees that on the back patio, Cece is sitting there at the little table, and she has sunglasses on. And oh my God, I completely forgot you were waiting, Cece. I am so sorry. And he explains that he was at the ear doctor. And then he's still trying to like make amends. Oh, you look lovely. Um, look how lovely you look. Why don't we go to your favorite restaurant, just the two of us? And of course, at that point, when Cece would have been delighted to hear everything
Mm-hmm.
Maxwell said to her, it is revealed her head kind of bobs down and she starts snoring.
Yes.
And and so Maxwell just kind of quietly exits, and poor Cece's just on the back porch missing her opportunity to hear how lovely she looks and going out to her favorite restaurant with Maxwell, just the two of them.
Hmm.
And we kind of hear in the background the music, and it's the rockabye, like, or lullaby, you know, little lullaby. Anyway, and that's the episode. Did you have
Yes,
anything you wanted to add?
that's it. That's the episode.
Okay.
Um, I am gonna go out on a limb and say there's probably something you want to talk about before we get into our sticks. Just
You
gonna
know
go
me
out on a
so
limb.
well, Debbie. You know me so well. I mean, just in general, you know what I'm gonna say. Um,
Adults
the
shouldn't date
whole
children.
yeah, yeah, that sums it up.
I try.
Anytime, anyone who's been longtime listeners of our podcast knows that that's my stance as well. It is interesting that we're told Maggie's 17 now. Um,
Hmm.
I guess it makes sense. I just never know when her birthday is.
Right. I mean, we saw her Sweet 16.
Yeah. At,
Um,
at Aunt Frida's.
correct. And all the Michigas before that.
And I feel like that was later in the season than, episode 2.
It was.
So
Without
anyway,
even without even looking, I can say that. It was.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, she's still 17. Obviously, this is better when she was 14, but
Yeah.
but again, still a minor.
Yeah.
And I just, yeah. Uh,
I'll point out it was episode 4.
okay. So not too far off, I guess, but still. Um,
I
yeah, I
mean,
don't even know how old Gracie is now. Like, if because her age varied for a
right,
while.
as does Brighton's. I mean, here's the
Yes,
thing. That's,
it
I
is
think,
what it needs to be in that moment of
correct.
time.
And also that's the thing with child actors. They grow up faster than you can tape a season. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, so yeah, she is a minor. I, d- you know, it was odd to me that they were trying to make Maxwell the bad guy for saying no.
well, here's the thing. Of course Maggie was going to see her dad as the bad guy.
Well,
She's a
yes,
teenager trying to date an adult. Anyone
yes,
who gets in her way is the bad guy. Um
exactly.
and
But it
Fran,
was almost like the show was saying like Maxwell was being unreasonable and all of that. And the only kind of message takeaway from it is just you shouldn't date older people because you don't have things in common, not because, power imbalance, you're a minor, like
all those other factors.
rumor. Yeah, like all that kind of stuff. So
Fair.
anyway, you knew I
But
was gonna say that.
right. But I will say, um Fran's plan did work out well because Fran is actually very wise in that, telling Maxwell if you just forbid her to see him, she's going to sneak out the window. That's what teenagers do. So this was a better option in that Fran said, "Let her go. I'll go on a date with her. I'll chaperone, and she'll find out like she's not actually interested in this guy, and she will walk away." Which is
Hmm.
way better than her running to the guy out her, open window.
Hmm. But it's also interesting how like nonchalantly Fran mentions that, when she was 17, she dated someone older as well, and heartbreak, and especially after failed math. And it's like, oh, let's
Yeah,
not romanticize student teacher
yeah, that's a whole different
relationship.
level. That's a whole different issue.
Again,
Um,
power dynamics, like they're, yeah. Anyway,
yeah, although in fairness,
don't
I
be
don't.
surprised that I am saying this
Yeah, I
about.
was just gonna say I don't think Fran was glorifying it. I think Fran was saying this was a terrible mistake on my part, and
Mhm. Well, I
you
mean,
know,
but she's still kind of nonchalant about it.
mm, I suppose
So
fair,
anyway, kind of normalizing in a sense, um,
interesting.
because she doesn't get into like, yeah, you shouldn't. That shouldn't have happened in the first. Anyway, whatever. You're not surprised.
No,
Is there
I'll also
anything? Oh, go ahead.
I'll just also say it's only a 22-minute program. They've got limited amount of time, so they're going to focus on the plot, not not stopping questionable decisions.
Hmm. Yeah, well, that's just kind of going to my comment regarding that is just how this show's kind of treating it.
Mhm.
Um, because you could have that conversation differently or like slip in a line about it.
Mm,
Um, versus how it's portrayed like, of course this happens all the time and like why is he being so unreasonable? Like anyway,
I
did
suppose.
yeah, was there anything you wanted to say before we got into the shticks?
I just don't understand why Cece would believe a word
Yes,
out of Niall's mouth. That's
yes.
that's what I want to say, which is
Especially when she questions him. So like she has an inkling, like if she's asking it, then she understands that things can have caffeine in them.
correct.
Yeah, it seems very out of character for her to just take Niles at face value.
Especially the tone of voice he used. Of course. Like,
Yep.
clearly he's lying through his teeth, Cece.
Yes.
I mean,
It's been
also,
happening for so long as well.
exactly. Like, after, I had trouble getting up, I couldn't fall asleep. I haven't slept for 3 days. Maybe that's a sign that you should stop drinking what he's giving you.
Yeah.
Maybe. Just a
Yeah.
thought.
Hmm.
That's the only thing I wanted to talk about before we get into our sticks.
Okay, so let's jump into favorite fashion. Did you have any favorite fashion from this episode?
Um, I think my favorite fashion is actually on Maggie.
Uh huh.
I liked what she was wearing at the bookstore when we get to meet the 25-year-old Lotharios. She's wearing a pink tank top dress that has white, the sleeves or the straps, I guess, are white, and then it has a little um, white trim under the bust line. I just thought that was a very nice look. I like that a lot. The other notable fashion I wanted to mention, I'm not sure I like, but I also don't hate, is what Fran's wearing in the bookstore. She's
Yeah.
wearing this like rainbow suit, which like on the sleeves at the wrist it's yellow, then it turns orange, then red, purple, and then by the shoulders it's blue and purple. And then down the front, like down the actual bodice or chest of the jacket. I don't know how else to describe it. The rest of the jacket, it's a similar thing where it's like red and then it goes down to green, and it's quite remarkable looking.
Well, to me, it looked like tie dye. That's
Yes,
what,
but it was too organized.
yeah. And I was actually going to comment on that as well because I was not so much a fan
I didn't think so.
of it. Yeah. To me, it looked like a tie dye dress. Um, but very vivid. It's not so much bleeding in as much.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It does look tie dye because there's also like the white, like the what hadn't been dyed. But
Yeah.
to me, it's just so well organized, like, or so well orchestrated, maybe that like it had to have been done intentionally like that. Like, it's something else. That's how I'll
Hmm.
describe it. It's something else.
Hmm. Yep. Agreed.
What did you think of the outfit Fran wore on her date with Mike? It was a
Uh,
black dress with white trim, and then like on near like the midsection there was like a cutout that looked like it was kind of like a muffler, like as if you had a sweatshirt where you'd stick your hands in.
yeah. 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 Um, I don't know if I had big thoughts one way or the other on it. Did you?
I didn't really care for it. I think without the like place where you could, without the front pocket, I would have
Hmm.
liked it a lot better. Also, I wasn't crazy about her shoes because she was wearing, as usual, heels. What else would she wear? But they had like a tie around the ankle, which like cuts off the leg. It makes her look shorter. So
Hmm.
I didn't care for that.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Yeah, I again kind of agree with you. I think I preferred some of Maggie's outfits more than Fran's this episode.
mhm.
But yeah, I don't really have much this week. I feel like
Yeah,
regard.
I
So
don't. Most of like, I think a lot of the outfits weren't that memorable. Like the only other outfits I can think of, Fran wears like a black skirt with a white jacket, and I think she wears like a pink suit. And they're just meh. What did you think of her hair? Did you notice that her hair was different in different
Yes.
scenes?
Yeah. Yeah, it did change quite a bit throughout.
Hmm.
Um, do you want to describe it?
Sure. So, I mean, we do see her normal do, with half of it up in the back and curly, the rest of it curly down the front, and it's poofy in the front. But we also saw it with all of it down and sort of rounded and just curly down to her shoulders.
Hmm.
Which do you like better?
Like, I'm trying to think if that made her look older or younger. Like, definitely, it made her look different than
Yeah,
than usual. Did you have like an impression one way or the other?
I mean, the way I look at it is it's a little bit less severe to have her hair all down like that.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think I kind of think it might make her look a little older,
Yeah.
but also it's just that it's different, so it draws more attention to the fact that it is different.
Hmm.
Um, so I
Yeah.
like her
So
regular
she's
hairstyle.
definitely, yeah, she's definitely been playing with it this season.
Hmm. Agreed.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to notable New Yorkers?
We are. There were a bunch this week.
Hmm. Um, Again, I believe we've talked already in previous episodes about Nathan's hot dogs.
Um, just in case we haven't, I did pull something up.
Okay.
So from the our friends at nathansfamous.com, apparently in 1916, Nathan Handworker began his nickel hot dog stand on New York's own Coney Island. He had his wife's recipe and a $300 loan. He had no idea how famous his hot dogs are going to be, and he had no idea about the millions around the globe who would tune in to see how many of those hot dogs would be consumed within 10 minutes, or that they would be available around the world. So that's a paraphrasing of the bio from Nathan's website.
Hmm. Madame Tussauds.
A museum displaying life-size wax figurines of celebrities. The second one in Europe opened in 1972. The first one in the United States opened actually in 1999. And the one in New York, which is, of course, the one I think of, opened in 2000. And that's
Oh,
according to our friends at MadameTussauds.com. I had no idea that it was so recently opened in New York.
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Linda Hunt.
An American actress who was the first person to win an Oscar for portraying a character of the opposite sex. She also, for Disney fans, voiced Grandmother Willow in Pocahontas.
Huh.
That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Hmm. Let's see here. Was there anything else you had in that first scene?
No.
Okay. Um, Sorry, just checking. Anna Nicole Smith.
An American actress, model, and television personality who started her career as a Playboy centerfold in 1992. Her second marriage in 1994 was to 89-year-old J. Howard Marshall, who died in 1995. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Hmm. We have talked about the Mary Tyler Moore show before, I believe.
We have it was an American sitcom that aired from 1970 to 1977, starring Mary Tyler Moore, who played Mary Richards, an unmarried woman who is focused on her career in Minneapolis. That's
Mhm.
according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Nick at Night.
Uh, a program in which sitcoms are shown in syndication.
Yes. And I grew up with Nick at Night as well. That's how I'm familiar with like older shows. Just like Mike.
Correct. Unlike Fran, who got to watch them on the original airing.
Exactly. We have another reference to Lomans. Um,
We do,
we've talked about Lomans a bunch before.
and we'll talk about it next week.
Oh, okay.
Minor spoiler. Sorry.
Yeah. So we have Pulp Fiction.
A 1994 crime film directed by Quentin Tarantino telling stories about crime in Los Angeles. The title is a reference to the pulp magazines, and crime novels that were popular in the mid 20th century. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
John Travolta.
An American actor whose career actually started in the 1970s. It declined in the 1980s before it resurged in the 1990s with Pulp Fiction, according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm. Santa Claus.
I did not list him.
Yes. I think everybody pretty much knows Santa Claus.
And if not, I want to know where you live, because
Yeah.
clearly you don't get bombarded with Christmas music starting in like July.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Um, let's see.
I'm going to jump in with a couple while you search.
Yep.
So Grisham is a reference to John Grisham. He is the author of, as of now, 47 consecutive #1 bestsellers.
Wow.
That's according a direct quote from his website. His books have been translated into almost 50 languages, and a lot of his work explores problems in the criminal justice system. That's according to jgrisham.com. Back to the Mary Tyler Moore Show, the references were to Phyllis and Lars. Phyllis is a reference to Phyllis Lindstrom, Mary's friend and neighbor, and Lars is Phyllis's husband, who, as far as I can tell from my so far limited watching of the Mary Tyler Moore Show, we've never seen.
Mm-hmm. So we also have Fran making the mistake. Okay, well, first of all, backing up a bit, were you able to figure out which show Cece had been watching
I
on
did
Fox?
not.
Okay, I didn't know offhand either. But Fran makes the mistake of saying it's Tootie and the Blowfish instead of Hootie and the Blowfish.
Mm-hmm.
And again, they were banned. Flipper. Did
Yeah.
you?
So they call him Flipper, Flipper, faster than lightning. No one you'll see is smarter than he. That's the Flipper theme song. That's according to our friends at lyricsondemand.com.
Christopher Plummer.
He is a Canadian actor who is actually the only Canadian recipient of the Triple Crown of Acting. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Mrs. Robinson.
So, I'm going to quote this. Mrs. Robinson is a term used to describe an older woman pursuing someone younger than herself in reference to the character from the 1967 movie The Graduate, end quote. And that's according to our friends at dictionary.com.
Yep. Then we have some designers that we've probably talked about before, but they're the Dependents. Donna
Yep.
Karan, Ralph Lauren, Liz Claiborne.
Yep. The only one I think we haven't talked about is Liz Claiborne. And so she was an American businesswoman and fashion designer who was known for her stylish yet affordable clothing for typically career women. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Joan Collins.
An English actress, author, and columnist who's recognized for her philanthropy, which is what led her to become a dame in 2015. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Tom Collins.
Tom Collins is a gin cocktail that has sugar, lemon juice, and carbonated water. And that's according to our friends also at Wikipedia.
Clueless.
1995 American comedy centering on a popular rich high school student. Also according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Yep, and it's a modern adaptation of Jane Austen's Emma.
Oh.
Yeah. Did you not know that?
I've never seen it, so.
Okay, well, there you go. Armand Desante.
An American actor known for his role as John Gotti. That's according to our friends also at Wikipedia.
Saved by the Bell.
An American sitcom airing from 1989 to 1992 that followed high schoolers in Los Angeles. Also according to our friends at Wikipedia. Also something I've never seen.
Okay.
Or at least I might have seen parts of it, but I don't know it.
I mentioned before that the Rockabye Baby lullaby is playing when Cece's sleeping at the end. Do you have any other references?
Miracle Whip.
Okay.
It's a condiment that was developed as a cheaper alternative to mayonnaise in 1933. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Does that transition us to Yiddish Cup?
It does. It does. So we're going to start with what everyone knows is coming, and that is bacon is not kosher.
Mhm.
And it really so I mean, in this case, it actually would make sense why she would sneak out of the house to eat it because it's not kosher. But as we've seen multiple times and throughout, um, her family doesn't even pretend to keep kosher.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, um, I don't really care for that. Um, I'll mention Camp Kindervelt, which we've talked about previously. Kindervelt means children's world. Camp Kindervelt was a Highland Mills, New York Jewish sleepaway camp that was run by a chapter of a New York chapter of a Zionist Mutual Aid Association. It was founded in the 1920s and closed in 1971. We talked about that in the episode Kindervelt Days. And then finally, the most interesting Jewish thing to talk about in this episode is in the bookstore, Fran asks Mike McMillan, what are the chances you're Jewish? And he says, well, actually, my mother is Jewish. So that technically, and she cuts him off, say no more. The traditional Judaism recognizes matrilineal descent, meaning that Judaism is passed along through the mother. Do you want to guess why that is?
Because you can always tell who the mother is.
That is exactly right.
Mhm.
Um, and so that's like um, the traditional viewing of how Judaism is passed on from generation to generation. But more recently, the reform movement recognizes uh, one parent, like matrilineal or patrilineal, as long as the child openly practices.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that's what's really interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's I think that's it.
Okay.
So yeah,
90s nostalgia.
old cars.
Yep. We saw plenty of that. Um, I feel like too, if this were modern, like now, Maggie, regardless, would be like texting or like sending via social media messages to John throughout
Yeah,
this thing.
agreed. And I also think they probably would have met online instead of in a bookstore.
Exactly. I was going to say that. It's like obviously real bookstores still exist, but I feel like probably not as frequented as
Hmm.
back in the 90s.
Agreed. Although I think there has been a slight resurgence in independent bookstores, but
Hmm.
still.
Well, the other thing too is that they were inquiring as to where Fran went to high school when she graduated. Again, this day and age, they probably would have like Googled her and
Oh
been
yeah,
able to find out that information.
agreed. And I think it would be much harder for Fran to have lied about her age in today's day and age.
Hmm. Yeah. Although it's like sometimes very difficult to tell how old someone is.
Yeah, I just feel like in the age of social media, it's harder because
Hmm.
like for example, if you created a social media profile, 10 years ago,
Hmm.
well, you probably didn't create that when you were 5.
Yeah. Although it's funny because I know I have some relatives who obviously created their like Facebook account prior to when they were 13 because they
Mhm.
like lied about what year
Being
they were
13 or
born.
older, yeah.
So like this particular relative turned 118 the other day.
Oh, wow. Happy birthday to them.
Yeah, right? Clearly did not input an actual birth date. So,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, can we go back to notable New Yorkers real quick?
mhm.
In the first scene in the bookstore, did you notice a red covered book in the like middle top left part of the screen?
I cannot say I did.
Well, I did, and that is actually Fran Drescher's book, Enter Whining.
Oh, interesting.
So
Is
I,
do you think they built this whole episode
I
so
um
that they could showcase it?
I, perhaps
Gave them
um
an excuse to go to a bookstore.
yeah, well, I'll circle back on that momentarily, like when we get into our future fun.
Mhm. Um, s- did you have any other 90s nostalgia?
I did not. Did you?
No. But we can contribute to our new shtick, the ATT. You know, this is after the thing.
Yup.
Times friend reminds Maxwell about the thing. And we are now 2 episodes into the 4th season, and she has brought it up in 2 episodes.
Correct. Correct. Good job, Fran.
Yes, 2 for 2.
Correct.
Future fun.
All right. So what I was hinting at about Fran's book, in just a few weeks, we're going to do the episode "The Tax Man Cometh," and this actually ties into a couple different things. One, Jay Leno is a guest star, and he had just published a book before, like shortly before the episode taped, and so he like brings his book, and Fran's like, "Oh, it's so nice for a celebrity not to be hawking their book all the time." And then she's like, "By the way, have you read this one?" And she like takes out her own book, and she's like, I think she makes a comment about how they're going to do it as an audiobook too.
Hmm.
And I think he makes a joke about who would want to listen to that voice. Um,
Whoa.
I think he does. But anyway, so there's that in that episode, and also that the tax man cometh hints that there's an audit coming, and Fran gets her taxes audited, um, and she tries to bring her accountant with her. Her accountant just happens to be Brighton.
Oh,
Um,
yes, because that's how you who you
become an
want to
accountant,
depend on.
clearly, right? Um, and so anyway, there's just a lot of fun with her dependents and how she keeps her records and what expenses are deductible, which aren't. And Maxwell ends up stepping in. It's a whole rigmarole.
Hmm.
So we've got that to look forward to in a few weeks. So that's one. Two, I kind of hinted. I've hinted at this before. Maggie orders a Joan Collins. Um, Joan Collins actually guest stars in The Nanny as Maxwell's beautiful, youthful stepmother in the
Wow.
episode Me and Mrs. Joan. And we will see uh, who Maxwell's father left his mother for. And we'll see just how similar she is to Fran.
Oh, interesting.
And they actually play that up the entire episode where they're wearing basically the same outfit, just slightly altered throughout the entire episode. Um, and then finally, to tie in with the comment that Fran makes about, no, I didn't say my dad was 10 years older than my mother. I said my mother took 10 years off his life. There's a later episode where Fran asks Yetta, why is it that the men who marry the fine women die young? And Yetta deadpans, it's because they want to.
Hmm.
So yeah, we've got some fun in store. Um, yeah, I think it's time to rate the episode.
Yes, and this week you get to go first.
I hate it when it's my turn. Okay, so this is a fine episode. It's not great. It's not terrible. It's not one I go out of my way to watch. It was enjoyable to watch, but like again, I'm probably not going to go and rewatch it 16 times, unlike a lot of other episodes that we've seen and are going to see. So to me, this sort of feels like a middling episode. So I'm going to give it a 3. How about you?
I'm gonna give it a 2.5, just because I know I didn't like it as much as you.
Okay, fair.
Yeah. I what like we pointed out, first of all, the whole plot, but the Cece thing was just so out of character.
Uh-huh.
Like, yeah. So
That's fair.
anyway, yeah,
Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I don't believe so. How about you?
I don't think so. All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 78, The Bird's Nest.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at findtimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.